doing Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 7, which is entitled The Sacrifice Performed by Daksha. Let me just try to switch the screen share thing over. Excuse me for my trying to figure out how to do this. Next. Aha, there we go. Jai. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavalabha Girivardhari Gopi Janavalabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Praja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Praja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunya Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunya Bihari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajikacharya Stotra Shatashi Madhus Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananda Kodi Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Sago Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Jai Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shamakun Radhakun Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Navadvip Mayapur Dham Ki Jai Gangamai Ki Jai Yamunamai Ki Jai Tulsi Devi Maharani Ki Jai Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to all the assembled devotees, all glories to all the assembled devotees, all glories to all the assembled devotees. Alright. So today we are reading from the 4th canto, chapter 7. Here we go. 4th canto, chapter 7, which is entitled The Sacrifice Performed by Daksha, and this is text 9. Okay. Just trying to check out the technology here. Alright. Let's make it a little bit bigger still. Okay. So you can read it if you like. Alright. Santiyamane shirasi daksho rudra vivikshita sadyashupta ivatastal Dadrishe Chavikrato Mridam Sandhiyamane Shirasi Daksho Rudra Bivikshita Sadyash Supta Ivotastal Dadrishe Chagrato Mridam Sandhiyamane Shirasi Daksho Rudra Bivikshita Sadyash Supta Ivatastal Tadarshe Chagrato Mridam. So word by word. Sandhiyamane, being executed. Shirasi, by the head. Dakshaha, King Daksha. Rudra, Abhi, Vikshitaha, having been seen by Rudra, Lord Shiva. Sadhyaha, immediately. Supte, sleeping. Eva, like. Thanks. Utastal, awakened. Tadrishe, saw. Cha, also. Agrataha, in front. Mridam, Lord Shiva. Translation. When the animal's head was fixed on the body of King Daksha, Daksha was immediately brought to consciousness. And as he awakened from sleep, the king saw Lord Shiva standing before him. The example given here is that Daksha got up as if he were awakened from deep sleep. In Sanskrit, this is called Supta Tastal. The meaning is that after a man awakens from sleep, he immediately remembers all the duties which he must execute. Daksha was killed and his head was taken away and burnt to ashes. His body was lying dead. But by the grace of Lord Shiva, as soon as the head of a goat was joined to the body, Daksha came back to consciousness again. This indicates that consciousness is also individual. Daksha actually took another body when he took on the head of a goat, but because consciousness is individual, his consciousness remained the same, although his bodily condition changed. Thus, bodily construction has nothing to do with the development of consciousness. Consciousness is carried with the transmigration of the soul. There are many instances of this in Vedic history, such as the case of Maharaj Bharat. After quitting his body as a king, Maharaj Bharat was transferred to the body of a deer, but he retained the same consciousness. He knew that although formerly he was King Bharat, he had been transferred to the body of a deer because of his absorption in thinking of a deer at the time of his death. In spite of his having the body of a deer, however, his consciousness was as good as it was in the body of King Bharat. The arrangement by the Lord is so nice that if a person's consciousness is turned into Krishna consciousness, there is no doubt that in his next life he will be a great devotee of Krishna, even if he is offered a different type of body. Om Jnana-timirandhasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshu Amlitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Sandhiyamane Shirasi Daksho Rudra Bivikshitaha Sadyasupta Ivotastal Tadrishe Chagrato Mridam. When the animal's head was fixed on the body of King Daksha, Daksha was immediately brought to consciousness, and as he awakened from sleep, the king saw Lord Shiva standing before him. Yeah. So in this particular verse, we hear this amazing pastime where a dead body is revived. Not only is the dead body revived, but the dead body is revived with a completely different head. And although it was a completely different head, the consciousness of the person, the original person, remained. So we discussed this last time we were giving class. Prabhupada is saying in the purport that actually the brain is not the source of consciousness. The consciousness is something independent. And regardless of whatever kind of brain you have or whatever kind of body you have, you can become Krishna conscious. So in this particular verse and purport, the same idea is coming across, that even though Daksha was given a different head, the head of a goat, he still maintained his same independent consciousness. Prabhupada is using this word individual, that the consciousness is individual. And I think you could also think of it in the sense of independent from the body, that the consciousness of Daksha exists as an independent or individual entity. And even if it's put into a different body, it still remains the same person. And in this case, we have Daksha, excuse me. In this case, we have Daksha remembering all of his activities from, he could say, his previous life, because it's practically a new body. This is quite rare. Generally speaking, when we take a new body, we don't remember the previous life. It's often said that the trauma of birth is so intense that it completely wipes out our recollection of previous life. Just like we see that sometimes people involved in a car accident or sometimes other traumatic experiences, they forget who they are, where they come from, and different things about their life. But there are some special cases where people do remember their previous lives. Prabhupada's mentioning Bharat Maharaj here, that Bharat Maharaj remembered, even though he was born in the body of a deer, he could still recall his previous life. And Prabhupada's reassuring us that if we take up Krishna consciousness, even if we stumble and have some hiccups along the way, that our Krishna will look after us and protect us. So in the case of Bharat Maharaj, he allowed Bharat Maharaj to remember his previous life, even in the body of a deer. And then again in the next life, he was born again as a human being, and he could remember his previous lives as a deer and as a king. So sometimes people might wonder, well, how come everyone doesn't remember their previous lives? Wouldn't that be helpful? If the idea is to rectify the soul so that they can go back to Godhead, if they remember their previous lives, then they'd realize that, I should serve Krishna and go back to him. And that's kind of the point. This world is not a world designed for remembering Krishna. It's a world designed for forgetting Krishna. And so because we have that desire to be independent of Krishna, the world is arranged in such a way that as we start our new lives, we forget the previous lives. And so that we can continue on in the illusion. It's like a virtual reality, like a computer game. When you die at a certain level of a computer game, and the next time you start the game, you could continue from that same level, or you may even start the game with a totally different avatar. The first time you play the game, you might be, like a cyborg, and in the next avatar, you might be a mutant turtle or something. So, this game world is giving a similar experience. But even though we generally don't remember consciously our previous lives, the impressions of those previous lives follow us. the actions and reactions of our previous life and the consciousness that we developed in those lives continue into this life. And that's why we can see that different people have different mentalities and personalities. Some people are very mellow and chilled, others are more uptight and angry. Some people are very serious about spiritual life, others are quite slack, or not interested at all. And some people are naturally inclined to different professions and different occupations and activities. This is all a continuation of our consciousness and our activities of the previous life. Just like Krishna says that the Varnashram system, it's not based on birth, it's based on our guna and karma, our qualities, which is like, in a sense, the consciousness that we've developed from our previous life, and our karma, which is the type of work which we're inclined to do. And it's also in terms of the work that we've already done and the effect that it's had on us now. So it's natural that in our previous life, if we have a particular guna and karma, that in this life we'll be born in a particular situation that matches it. So often, for example, the son of a king will become a king. It's natural, but it's not the ultimate point. The point is the quality and the consciousness, not the fact that they're born the son of a king. It's the fact that they naturally develop those qualities. So there are some cases where people remember their previous lives, just like Bharat Maharaj. There's also the example of Chitraketu. He had a son, and the son died, and the son was revived. And then they asked the son, first of all, Narada Muni, I believe it, was asking, Angira Muni and Narada Muni were both there, and they said to the son, look, come back to your father's missing you, why have you gone away? And the son said, well, which father are you talking about? I've had so many lives. And so in this way, the son was able to teach the father about spiritual life by the mercy of Narada and Angira Muni. And this son at that time was able to remember different lives that he had. So this happens from time to time. Krishna has interesting ways of giving us clues. So although we generally don't remember our previous lives, sometimes we might get a deja vu experience, like, oh, I've seen this before. Or we hear about cases of people who had experiences from previous lives. So Arjuna made a really awesome episode on his Theology Unleashed YouTube channel. So I just wanted to play a short snippet from one, which is about children who remember their past lives. So I'm just going to press play, and I hope that the sound and everything comes through properly. I'll just plug in my headphones to make sure that it doesn't, make a funny effect. And let's just try playing this video. It's just a few minutes.
James recognized other shipmates by name and told
Okay, it looks like the audio is not working on that video, so what I'll do is I'll just play it so that hopefully it'll pick it up on my microphone, and hopefully you'll be able to hear it properly. So I'll just start it again. That's it. This is it. Okay, and I'll just hopefully you can hear it from my loudspeaker. I'll turn it up.
His mother about James Houston's most treasured possessions and his sister.
Okay, here we go. Technology, eh? And now it decides not to play. Very interesting.
He was a normal 7-year-old with a unique passion, an extreme fascination with World War II fighter planes. His parents say began as a toddler.
And I said, "Oh, look, there's a bomb in the bottom." He said, "That's not a bomb, that's a drop tank."
Then came the violent drawings and night terrors.
Bombing ships, you see men parachuting. Here's another one where planes are dropping bombs.
Help me. He would just be crying. He'd say, "Airplane crash on fire and little man can't get out." He laid on his back and kicked up at the ceiling and he goes, "Mama, the little man's going like this." And he laid on his back and kicked his feet up. The little man's going, "Ooh, ooh, 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 ooh," can't get out. And I said, "Well, who's the little man, baby?" And he goes, "Me." I thought Bruce and I were just going to faint.
They questioned, what kind of plane?
Corsair.
Why did your airplane crash?
My plane was shot down.
Who shot your plane?
He looked at me like I was a village idiot. He said,
"The Japanese."
He said his name was James,
But his name is James.
whose plane took off from the USS Natoma Bay and was shot down over Chichijima. The Leiningers hoped to disprove it, but learned it was all real, including a pilot named James Houston. Leo Pyatt served with Houston.
Yes, there was a Jim Houston, a rather large shell, just hit him in the engine, and it burst into flames and went down.
James recognized other shipmates by name and told his mother about James Houston's most treasured possessions and his sisters, Annie and Ruth.
The case of James Leininger shows many prominent features. He had obsessive behavior.
And then during the day, he would take his toy airplanes and he would say, "Airplane crash on fire," and he would slam them nose first, bam, into the coffee table. He would do this over and over again. So that looks very similar to what we in children's mental health call post-traumatic play, where a child who has experienced or witnessed something traumatic then reenacts the scene over and over again in their play. And when you combine that with his nightmares, he really looks like a child who had been traumatized, but he had not been, at least in this life.
They were able to identify a pilot who died just as James Leininger described, the life of which James Leininger was able to give accurate information of. Here's a list of the information he gave, which later proved to be accurate.
What I can do is list all the items where we have definite documentation that was made before anyone knew anything about James Houston. Much of it comes from an interview that the Leiningers did with ABC News, again, before anyone knew if James's statements actually matched an actual pilot. James signed his drawings James III. Houston was James Jr., which would make James Leininger the third James. James said that he flew off the Natoma. Houston was a pilot on the USS Natoma Bay. James said he flew a Corsair. Houston had flown a Corsair. He was actually flying a different plane when he was killed, but he was part of the squadron that had tested the Corsair for the Navy. James said he was shot down by the Japanese, and Houston was shot down by the Japanese. James said he died at Iwo Jima. Houston was the one Natoma Bay pilot killed during the Iwo Jima operation. James said one day, quote, "My airplane got shot in the engine and crashed in the water, and that's how I died." Eyewitnesses reported that Houston's plane was, quote, "hit head on right on the middle of the engine." James had nightmares of a plane crashing and sinking in the water. Houston's plane crashed in the water and quickly sank. And James said that Jack Larson was there, and Jack Larson was the pilot of the plane next to Houston's on the day that he was killed.
All right, so yeah, we can just stop there. Let's switch the screen back again. So thanks to Arjuna for finding that interesting video. And if you want to check it out, just go to Theology Unleashed and look for a video called Evidence for Reincarnation, Children Who Remember Past Lives. And there's another example as well. Let me just play this one more example, which is also cool. Switch back again.
The next case I'll show is of Tita.
Actually, the sound of this one is not so good, so I'm just going to skip that one over. But it was a story about a boy in India, and if I remember correctly, he had a bullet, like a mark in his head, like a birthmark, kind of like a scar. And he said, in my previous life, I lived in another city some distance away, and I got shot in the head. And this mark on his head matched where he was shot in the previous life. So, definitely check out the video. It's really intriguing. And it really gives a lot of evidence for reincarnation. How else can you explain it? I just can't think of any other explanation other than reincarnation. So, great job, Arjuna, on bringing these examples up so that people can develop some faith in this concept of reincarnation, which is very helpful for their Krishna consciousness. So, going back to this purport. So this is a confirmation again. Prabhupada's giving the example of Bharat Maharaj from the Srimad Bhagavatam. We also have the example of Chitraketu's son, who remembered his previous lives. And now we also have these modern examples. And in that video that Arjuna shared, there's other examples. And he shares about one researcher who has many, many cases like this. People try to make out like it's a fraud or whatever, but they're not really able to give very good refuting evidence about rejecting all these cases. So I just wanted to switch gears a little bit now after talking about this idea that the body has previous lives and it can go from one body to another and even remember things from the previous life. I just want to go back to the very first line here. Let me see if I can share it. Not exactly sure how this thing's working. I'll just quickly go back to the purport here. So this interesting section here, it says that Daksha got up as if he were awakened from deep sleep. In Sanskrit, this is called supta eva utishtata, which means supta means sleep and utishta means to get up. So when someone gets up from their sleep, then they remember who they are. So I just kept thinking, it made me think how Prabhupada explained about Krishna consciousness. He said that it's not an artificial imposition on the mind. It's a natural condition of all living beings. And when we reach the stage of Krishna consciousness, we will remember our spiritual identity. And Prabhupada said that he named his magazine Back to Godhead. And the idea is we want to go back to Godhead. And he said, so we originally from the spiritual world, but somehow we've come here. And in this particular lecture I was listening to, Prabhupada said, how we came here and why we came here, that is a very mysterious thing. But whatever the reason or the way that it happened, the main thing is that we want to, reawaken ourselves in our natural spiritual consciousness. And as it's mentioned here, Prabhupada's saying that when Daksha got his new body back, then he immediately remembered what he needed to do. And in the same way, when we revive our Krishna consciousness, we'll automatically know how to serve Krishna and feel that we've come back home, back to our original condition, our natural state. So I thought that was just a nice meditation to end on, thinking about how, we may be changing from so many bodies, and we may sometimes remember some things from our previous lives, but usually we don't. But ultimately, when we wake up in our spiritual body, then everything becomes natural and everything becomes perfectly happy, and we just feel completely satisfied in the identity as a servant of Lord Krishna. So I'll end here. I don't see any comments. However, if you'd like to add any comments after, even on the replay, I'll check and respond if you have anything interesting you want to share or any questions you would like to ask. So thank you very much. Granth Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.